Welcome to the Investor Coaching Show, a podcast to help you get an insider's view of the financial world and escape common investment traps. We look at the financial news of the day and help you make sense of it so you can relax about money. And here's your host, Paul Winkler.
And welcome. This is the Investor Coaching Show, and I am Paul Winkler, along with Evan Barnard, and now Ann Sawaski.
Hello.
If I had you guys to, I've had you guys together.
We've got the
on
brain
show.
trust in the house today.
We do.
Yeah.
Sheer brilliance is coming your way.
That's right.
That's actually.
You don't want to change. Do not want to change the channel when
Yeah.
you've got this crew.
Yeah, that's actually not even funny.
Because you don't
that it's the
even
brain
know.
trust.
There's like 20 designations between the three of us.
I think at least.
You have 16 and we have 4, I think.
No, I don't think that. No. So, anyway, so you guys, Thanksgiving, I mean, you know, it's that time of year. There's a church I was passing on the way. It's a good time to give thanks and to do giving. They broke them apart. I thought it was good. So I like this time of year. It's just, it goes so fast though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it really
I mean,
does.
literally, the next few weeks is going to blow right by us, and we're not going to even know what hit us.
True.
But anyway, so, you know, I hope everybody out there had a lovely Thanksgiving, that you bought a lot of stuff. I heard people were being a lot more particular about the things they were buying. On Black Friday, you got Black Friday. Do you know where that started?
No.
They had something it was in 1869.
Oh, really?
There was this gold crash, of all things.
Interesting.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that.
That's the first recorded use of Black Friday.
Huh.
And then later on, of course, there was something that was kind of funny because they were going to change the name to Big Friday because they thought Black Friday was too negative. So they were going to change it to Big Friday. And it had something to do with, there was Army Navy game, or I don't know. I was reading something. I read way too much stuff. But so I forget what I read. But there was this thing. And then, of course, most people think of Black Friday from the perspective of shoppers and people buying and taking companies out of the red into the black.
That's what I thought it was for.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I'd always heard before. But it's,
They're finally profitable on the 4th week of November.
Yeah, well...
What a tightrope to be walking.
When you finally got your taxes paid.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Is that the way it works? It used to be, remember they used to do that thing where you look at what point in the year you have actually...
Tax Freedom Day.
Yeah, Tax Freedom Day.
Yeah.
It's like in May, isn't it, or something like that?
Well, it used to be.
Well, is it even later
Maybe
than that
August now. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's summer now.
Yeah.
Which is really not a good thing.
Yeah, Tax Freedom Day is on January 2nd of the following year.
Yeah. True.
Well, that's kind of like the government Freedom Day. We're like 3 years behind or something.
I'm not sure what it is. But anyway, so speaking of happiness and thankfulness, there was an article in MarketWatch. Leviticus, you probably like this because you like this kind of stuff. On happiness, the price tag for happiness. Millennials have come up with their number.
Yeah.
They have come up with their number. It's $525,000. That's what they need to be happy. Now, this is not accumulation. This is an annual income.
Are you serious?
I am not joking. They need an annual income of $525,000 to be happy.
Wow.
It says millennials say they need $525,000 salary to achieve financial happiness, the highest among the generations, according to, I would hope it's the highest among, according to Empower survey conducted by the Harris Poll. So they basically look at the annual salary. Millennials, the generation born roughly between 1981 and 1996. Man, I just missed it with my kids. Just missed it. 1997, first one born.
There you go. We are at the tail end of the millennials.
Okay. So they far outpaces the other generations with their salary desires. Their desired salary, I would
By
hope.
a factor of 5.
Well, you're close. You are really, really close. The desired salary is more than triple that of Gen X, which had the next highest salary needs.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, wow. The median weekly earnings for a U.S. worker is $1,059, which would be $55,068 for the entire year, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So that's what the average is. So they only want 10 times the median salary.
That's not that
And they
big
don't want
of
to
an
have, and they
ask.
don't want to have children to pay for colleges or anything.
Yeah.
It's just them.
Oh,
and
yeah.
$500,000.
Or work hard.
Yeah.
I mean,
Wow.
it's no. I'm not kidding. I'm just that's the cliche.
I was going to turn
All
your
right.
mic off.
I know what you were gonna do.
Be nice.
Wow.
I was just having fun. I gotta watch where I have fun, though, don't I? Okay, Paul, behave. The survey also found that 71% of Americans believe that having more money would solve most of their problems, but money's relationship with happiness is a complicated one. According to research over the years, many studies have shown that money and happiness are correlated, but to what extent is still unknown. Now, we've all heard these numbers, right? For example, a prominent 2010 study, Kahneman, the Kahneman study, right, that he did, it was in 2010, he was looking at Angus Deaton, both Nobel Prize winners from Princeton, found that money only, and probably glad that they're not from Harvard right now, right?
I don't know.
Oh, no, I'm joking. Yeah, he's like, Evan's like, no, I don't know. But they had the emotional well-being of an income you need is $75,000 a year.
Yeah. I remember the 75K number.
Yeah. In subsequent research, they've increased it to some extent. And I've heard 90,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. But anyway, so basically what they're saying here is this is what it takes to be happy. Now, there was a book, and it was What Happy People Know, and I've talked a little bit about this book before. I mean, I get a little more detail than I normally get. One of the things I normally share about this book was it was looking at Maslow's hierarchy, and it was talking about how, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, air, food, water, clothing, shelter, and then you get that need met, you can't do anything else until you get that need met for air, shelter, you need food, those types of things. And then you can move into relationships, and then you can start to, you get shelter needs met and things like that, but you can move into relationships. Then you can get into love, and I need to be loved was the thing that Maslow said. And this guy argued, nah, you need to love, because if you need to be loved, you give control over to the person that can give or withhold love from you. So that was the idea. So what basically he said was that puts you back in the driver's seat. But there are other components that he talked about in there. And this is, people think that money, and Solomon, you go back to Ecclesiastes, he's like, I had it. I had all the money you could possibly want. I had a relationships. I had all the servants. I had all the property. I had all the stuff. And he said, I just wasn't happy.
Had all the wives.
Yeah. Even laughter. I mean, entertainment. And we think if I could just, like if I could be around comedians all the time, I'd be happy. If I watch funny TV shows, I'm depressed. I won't be depressed anymore, and I'll be happy. But he said there were 12 components. And, one was love. We talked about that. But, optimism and looking forward, having something to look forward to, and thinking about what's coming and what am I excited about in the future. I don't know if you guys do that, but I do that all the time. I'm always thinking about, I always tell my kids, live in the present, live in the present, live in the present. But I'm always thinking about, there's something that's going to be coming up that I'm looking forward to. So I always have my eye to that to some extent.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just hope.
It is hope.
Hope is just important.
Yeah. It's interesting. One of professors over at Trevecca made the comment, says hope is always, it always makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's always relevant. It's always something that, that works in any kind of, when you're dealing with people, if you can provide some sense of hope that something good is coming.
Mm-hmm.
But courage was another thing. And, having courage, because so many times what we do, is we approach life with a sense of, fear of what's going to happen, what's going to go wrong. And courage, they say that courage is not necessarily, jumping out there and doing something because you're not scared.
Right. It's not the absence of fear. It's the ability to act in the presence of fear.
Yeah, exactly. And so you have a sense of freedom. I mean, and it's like I have some kind of choice as to what I can do, and I can make decisions, and I'm not being forced in one direction or another. And you think about, that's a big part of it. And being proactive, was another part of it. And security, of course, is, Maslow did have that down right. But health was another thing. And I remember one of my good friends was, for a while, he was doing this job, and he was just kind of like this sideline thing where he was parking cars over at Vanderbilt Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And he made a comment, this really, really nice limousine pulled up. And he said, and this person was being brought to the hospital because they were, sitting there with something wrong. And he said, didn't matter how much money that person had.
Right.
I mean, it didn't really matter. It was, if you don't have your health, it's kind of not a whole lot else makes sense, right?
Well, it's like the Steve Jobs quote when all of that stuff went on.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Incredibly wealthy, and he was dealing with cancer or whatever it was that he had.
Yeah.
And, just money doesn't fix everything.
No.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I remember he had that quote. That was really good. And it was, who's the comedian? The guy, Jim Carrey. He says, I wish everybody could have the success that I've had. And he said, then they would just recognize that money doesn't do it.
Yeah. Oh, that's
Well,
neat.
you see that with celebrity after celebrity after celebrity, that they have everything, but then they are not in a happy marriage, or they have some problem, or they are complaining and not happy generally, or they,
Right.
some of these athletes, they have the world by the tail, and then they go and do some illegal thing, so they
Right.
lose it all. And
Well-
you just go, why would you do that?
Right.
And
You know?
Yeah, and what happens with people is that quite often, if I have a hard time, if I'm worried about being rejected by other people, if I have problems with relationships with other people, I may move toward money, or I may move toward work, or I may move to something that won't reject me.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about that. We're getting that time of year where you're going to see A Christmas Carol, and you've got the first ghost that
Right.
Yeah.
he gets visited by, and what happens? He's brought back to when he had that woman that he was in love with, and he chose money over her.
Mm-hmm.
And you go, why on earth did he make that choice? And that is one of the reasons that people do that. And they're just afraid, and it's just, I mean, that's part of the courage thing. And just thinking about, when you're in relationships with people, so often you don't say what you want to say, or you're not proactive, to use the word that's being used in here, simply because you're afraid of what the reaction is going to be, and that you're just going to be pushed away.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
To be a little philosophical here. But spirituality was the next one. That was the next one that this psychologist that wrote the book, What Happy People Know, it was one of the things that he actually pointed out. Spirituality was another part of happiness. Altruism. We just talked a little bit about being thankful and giving, being altruistic. And you think about happiness coming from being other-centered. When
Right.
you're the one giving love,
Yes.
you're in the driver's seat again. So if you're just tuning in, this whole study about the average, the millennials being asked, how much money do you need to be happy? $525,000 per year.
10 times the median income in the U.S.
10 times.
Yeah.
And then perspective was another thing. And it's like when you're going through something, having perspective, so often what we can do is we can look at the negative of things, or we can look at how it's going to turn out well. What is a possible positive of something that has gone wrong in your life? So often we look at the things in our life, and we look back with regret. This thing went bad. I can't believe I made this decision. And anytime you make a decision, that's to me, you've got a fork in the road. You got to take it. Anytime you make a decision, you're going to exclude something else you could have done.
Right.
Right.
I think about careers. Oh my goodness. You got this whole tree of careers you could have taken, all these different things.
I think that is one of the aspects of life that Hollywood and or the TV studios have really done a good job of illustrating, whether it's Hallmark movies, whether it's other movies, the one decision of, well, I I took this bus or I didn't take. I mean, that's part of the magic of the story is, okay, there's a guide and I mean, it's a formula.
Yeah.
But I think they've done a great job of at least giving you the ability to picture, what if I had done this?
Right.
And causes your brain to, you wake up at 3 a.m. Gee, what if I'd done this or that?
What if I'd made that decision?
Right.
How things.
Yeah.
Or I did make that decision and look at everything that happened because of that one decision.
Yeah. If you're positive.
Yeah.
You can look at it that way.
Yeah.
But sometimes people, they end up in a place that they don't feel like that they did what they were supposed to do. There's one actually, a psychologist actually talks about, this is a little gruesome, but he talks about death and dying. And his thing is that so often, and this guy, I'm just going to say that he is a non-believer, okay? He's not a Christian. But he thinks that a lot of the people that he deals with, which are in that same boat, are unhappy. And the reason they're unhappy because they did not live lives that were fulfilled, that they lived the lives with their song still in them to some extent. And I don't know what he's seen to believe that, but it is an interesting thing to look at is, did I come here and do what I was supposed to do?
Right. And I mean, I think that's a big part of our American dream experience too, is we try to help people figure out their purpose so they accomplish that.
That is so true. Yeah,
Well,
that is really good.
The great minds.
Yeah.
So,
That's where you were thinking, wasn't it, Evan?
In one of the
I
early
think that is such a good point.
in one of the early conversations on that event, we talk about money can't make you happy.
Right.
And money exists in language. And in thinking about that article, think about those millennials that are only making 200,000, only making 300,000, and they're not happy because in their mind, I can't be happy unless I'm making 525.
Right.
But for them, it becomes true. They're not happy.
Yeah, where'd that
They're
number
making a
come from?
quarter mil,
Yeah.
and they're miserable.
Yeah. Well,
And you've got to overcome that.
Which is far more than many people make who are happy.
Right.
Which is the irony of
Well, think
it,
about it in
isn't it?
sports. I mean, people have been watching a lot of sports lately, right? Because you got all these bowl games coming up and things like that. And you're not going to be the best athlete on the field. But, I love what Victor Wooten said. He's a bass player. And he was doing this thing, and it's phenomenal, unbelievable bass player. And he had this thing, he was up there and he says, people talk about, this bass player, blah, blah, blah. He goes, here's the deal. He says, I am not the best bass player in the world. And they're like, well, nobody can be, but you're pretty doggone good is what, everybody's thinking, right? And he goes, but I am the best me that I can be. And that is it. I don't get into comparisons with other people. You get into comparison shopping with other people and looking at other people compared to you, and it's a losing game.
Right.
Because you're always going to be better
enough.
than somebody else. Yeah, you're always going to be better than that other person at something else.
Yeah.
And if your self-talk is basically all about where I don't measure up. One person made the point, he says, depression, I don't know about the truth of this, but I thought it was an interesting, try to make the point. 100% of depression is, self-talk. It's what we say to ourselves and the communication that we have with ourselves. And, so often the communication isn't good. So that's, those are the things, you look at, the causes, spirituality, altruism, perspective, humor was another thing that they had mentioned in there, and purpose. This is back to that book that I have talked about so many times before. It's What Happy People Know. But it's a good definition of happiness. I think there's a lot of good stuff in there. And, the idea is that what we often do, and one of the premises in the book was that fear is the source or the cause of unhappiness. And it's typically the fear, you've heard me say this a number of times before if you listen to the show, it's not fear of not having enough and not being enough. And what happens, we have these ineffective ways that we try to be happy. Number one is we try to buy it, like we see here. We try to find it through pleasure. Solomon tried to do that, right? That's what the whole idea was, and where he kept running into a brick wall, trying to resolve the past, and talking about it, and trying to fixate on how things didn't go the way they were supposed to go. And I'm often going, you know what? Things went exactly the way they were supposed to go. You know, you run into brick walls because that's how you learn. You know, if I want to harden steel to use it for making a hammer, I heat it, I cool it, I heat it, I cool it, I bring it through extremes. If I want to try to strengthen a person, I put them through extremes. Heavy intensity sets with the barbells, right?
Yeah.
That's how you do it.
I have a friend who says her slogan is rejection is God's protection.
Yeah.
And it can be sometimes.
Oh, and it's a really good point. It's, maybe something doesn't come through. And I've had this conversation with a few family members recently. This may not happen for you, but think of what might happen if you force it. Here are the negative things that could happen on this decision you're thinking about making, the thing that you want so badly. It's like Garth Brooks with his, thank God for unanswered prayers, right?
Yeah.
He's talking about that. I would end up with this girl, and my goodness, now look at what would have happened if that happened, right? Right?
That's true, yeah.
And what we try to do is we try to go through our life working on our weaknesses instead of looking at our strengths and going with those.
Yes.
Yeah. Very
Yes,
true.
totally.
Very true.
It's a big deal. So anyway, a little philosophy on the Investor Coaching Show. It is about money. I mean, the whole article is about money. I'll steer it this way once in a while, guys. You just know I'm going to do it. You're listening to the Investor Coaching Show. Paul Winkler, Ann Sawaski, Evan Barner. Be right back after this. Thanks for tuning in to the Investor Coaching Podcast. Now, you may be one of these people that's been listening and realizing, wow, investing, there's a lot more to it than meets the eye, and financial planning, tax laws constantly changing, and recognizing that maybe you might need some help in this area, but you don't want just anybody to help you out. So we have 10 offices in the Middle Tennessee area, and everything that we do is fee only. We align our interests with your interests. So you can get an initial 15-minute phone call with any one of our offices just by going to paulwinkler.com/call. That's it. Every one of the offices is run by somebody with 20 plus years experience. They're all degree planners. They all have academic backgrounds in investing, and you can get the help that you need. So if you want to set up a complimentary phone consultation, just go to paulwinkler.com/call. And we look forward to seeing you soon. How old is too old, guys?
I know.
Did you see that?
I did.
Yeah.
If you dread living too long, it may be time to rethink your attitude. Recent advances in longevity research have led many retirees to embrace live to 100, that rallying cry. Their goal is to stay alive for a full century. You know what? You think about that. What would you have seen? Now, we've done workshops on this because we try to give historical perspective on stock markets.
Mm-hmm.
Because people see ups and downs in the markets, and they, oh my goodness, the stock market is so volatile today compared to, and I'm like, no, it's always been volatile.
Yeah.
no, it's not new. It's always been pretty volatile. But if you think back, if you were 100 years old, you would have been around when Lindbergh. And you would have only been like 3, I think. Would have been when Lindbergh, transatlantic.
Everything since
flight.
1923, right? So.
Yeah, right. 1929 crash. You'd been 6 years old, right?
Would have lived through the Depression.
The Depression. Yeah. You would have seen, the news on Pearl Harbor. You'd probably been old enough.
Fought in the war of World War II.
Let's see, 23. So
yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
You're right. You're right.
Yep.
You're right. That's it. That's absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
And then you would have you've seen the end of the war. I think about the end of the war. I wanted to be in one of those parades. You think about that.
You
what
wanted
was
to
that?
kiss the girl on the street in New York.
Evan.
Come on, let's be honest.
Evan. But just the happiness, how excited people were. I have actually in one of my rooms in my house, I have the newspaper from the war, the end of the war, World War II, because I'm fascinated with that.
Well, my parents
I've got to frame that thing. I've got to frame it before it gets too old.
Of that era. And they would talk about that. And my mother worked in a plant that made planes. They worked 24 hours a day.
That's happening right now in Ukraine. They have these women are going and taking their husbands' jobs right now. That's happening.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about that the other day. It's just, wow, that's happening overseas right now.
They're filling in for their husbands while
Yeah.
their husbands are fighting.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean,
They're not taking their jobs.
okay.
I have to clarify that.
I guess we have to see.
Right.
I mean, it depends how this all.
Yeah,
I mean,
two of
with-
my aunts built planes as well.
Yeah.
in
And
Indiana.
With,
a number of my uncles were under patent and,
Yeah.
flew in Normandy. And,
1950s drive-ins, guys.
Yeah.
There you go.
That just seems like fun.
We do
Yeah.
tend to focus on the wars or things, but to me, and I had studied this some back when I was in school, but air conditioning was one of the biggest cultural changes
Oh yeah.
to the society when that finally became a thing. Indoor air conditioning.
Yeah. It was interesting because I was actually reading through the various innovations.
Yeah.
The blender. I mean, just
Launched Jimmy Buffett's career. I mean, hey.
That's true. Nibbling on sponge cake, right? Woodstock. There you go. But here's the dark truth about longevity. Some retirees dread the thought of living too long. Maybe they're worried that they're going to outlive their savings. And we often talk about how to, the RMD rules. If you invest, what we've been talking about for years on this show, following academic research and the RMD rules, I have a whole video on it on the website. But that helps that. But if they stay relatively healthy, attending an ever-increasing number of funerals for family and friends takes a toll. And they wake up every morning amid grief and loneliness, and that's one of the negatives that they talk about. And it's pretty negative. The first part of the article is very negative, but they were talking about, I thought it was interesting that, this one person goes, no, you know what? There's no reason for me not to live longer than my spouse. I have, in having other connections and having a support system is important for people. But, I think it's interesting to look at the statistics because I was surprised. It says 70% of respondents said that their health was good or excellent at age 85. And you think, well, that seems pretty negative. The first part of it, but you look at that and go, that's a fairly high percentage of people at age 85 that are boasting of decent health.
Yeah.
I was surprised about that.
And they're past life expectancy, frankly, in most cases.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads to that, the data that the longer you live, the longer you'll live.
Well, but they also had, they did the statistic that 1 in 4 suffer from, and I'm going, wait, 3 in 4 don't suffer from is the way I want to reword this sentence. 3 out of 4, 75% of people don't suffer from dementia, loneliness, or another debilitating condition. And to me, that you look at that and go, wow, you know what? Some people come in my office, I'll say, hey, give me a life expectancy because we're trying to do planning for Social Security purposes. And usually the number that they give me is a lot shorter than it's probably going to be.
Right.
Yes, I've noticed that.
Have you?
Yeah.
So I usually add like 5 years to it and go, we're just going to add 5 years.
Yeah.
Just humor me.
So question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is for the older generation now that's living.
Yes.
I think it's going to change when I get older.
Do I think it's going to
Because
change?
then we talk about loneliness last Saturday.
What part of it is going to change? Because life expectancy is elongating due to medical science.
Yeah.
You have
Meaning like the loneliness stuff. Like especially with my generation, we're more.
it's a good question because
solo.
That's a really good point, Leviticus.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of times if you don't learn how to do relationships, and one of the things that they have gotten into, I think, is maybe I think they're starting to come full circle around that to some extent. I'm starting to see more people going, hey, you know what? I can't just sit here and hide behind my phone. I think people are going to get sick of phones. I don't know.
I'm close, so I'm sure that's going to happen.
Yeah, I think at some point people are going to go, wait. This was supposed to make me happy. It takes time, but I think people finally get to the point where they realize, this isn't giving me what I thought it was going to give me. And if they could just go and stick those stupid things and just stick them off someplace else and get away from them, I think they'd
You know what?
Go play outside.
Go play outside like your mom told you.
Touch grass.
That's right.
Yes.
Go touch grass with your toes right now. It's a little cold out right now. But
Really cool bar up in Wisconsin that they had a mural on the wall of the regulars back in the day.
Yeah.
You kind of think of Cheers or something.
Yeah, sure. Everybody knows your name.
Right. Well, what ended up happening was everyone had their phones, so nobody talked to each other anymore. So they made a rule. When you came in there, you had to put your phone in a box.
Yes.
Or you
like
were
school.
not allowed in there.
You got your little cubby hole.
Yeah.
There's where your phone goes.
And they
Yes.
were... And they found it totally changed the atmosphere.
Well, and there was an article in the Wall Street Journal months ago, and it was talking about they took the phones away from kids, and they didn't mind.
It was in some high-end prep school or something, wasn't it?
I don't remember
like a
exactly
private
where it
school or
was. I don't
something.
remember where it
Yeah.
was, but they
Yeah.
took the phones away from the kids, and they didn't buck against it. They were okay with it. They were actually happier.
Well,
Go
I
figure.
believe they are, but boy, they didn't like this at
Oh,
first.
no.
But then they all realized
Then they had
it
to
was,
talk to each other.
Yeah, exactly.
They had to get
and
social
it was
skills.
so healthy, and it was a better thing.
I think you can, I think that would be a really good thing. Hey, this is Paul Winkler. Hope you enjoyed today's edition of the Investor Coaching Show. You want to learn more about what we do, go to our website, paulwinkler.com. You can watch some of the videos there, and if you're not already a client, you can set up a free initial consultation. Until next time, I'm Paul Winkler, reminding you that I believe that more educated investors are more confident investors, and confident investors are more successful investors. Have a great one. Advisory services offered through Paul Winkler, Inc., an SEC-registered investment advisor. The opinions voiced and information provided in this material are for general informational purposes only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine what investments are appropriate for you, please consult with a financial advisor. Paul Winkler, Inc. does not provide tax or legal advice. Please consult your tax or legal advisor regarding your particular situation.